Hello, I am Abisha, Department of Computer Science and Engineering from Emmanuel Arasar JJ College of Engineering. Today we are discussing about Software Requirement Specification. Software Requirement Specification means it's a requirement document is a reference document. SRS document is a contract between the development team and the customer. Once the SRS document is approved by the customer, any subsequent control is settled by referring the SRS document. Software Requirement Specification. Purpose of Software Requirement Specification are communication between the customer, analyst, system developers, maintainers, contract between purchaser and supplier, firm foundation for the design phase, support system testing activities, support project management and control, controlling the evaluation of the system. SRS document. The SRS document is known as black box specification. The system is considered as a black box whose internal details are not known. Only its visible external behavior is documented. SRS document concentrates on what needs to be done, carefully avoids the solution aspects. The SRS document serves as a contract between development team and the customer. Should be carefully written. The requirements at this stage written using end-user terminology. If necessary, later a formal requirement specification may be developed from it. Defines the customer's requirements in terms of function, performance, external interfaces, design constraints. The SRS is the basis of contract between the purchaser and supplier. Specification principles. Separate functionality from implementation. Develop model of desired behavior of the system. Establish the context in which software operates. Define the environment in which system operates. Create a cognitive model. Specifications must be tolerant of incompleteness and augmentable. Content and structure of a specifications should be manageable to change. Project requirements. Cost, delivery, schedule, staffing, reporting procedures, design solutions, partitioning of software into modules, choosing data structures, product assurance plans, quality assurance procedures, configuration, management procedures, verification and validation procedures. Benefits of SRS. Forces the users to consider their specific requirements carefully. Enhances communication between the purchaser and system developers. Provides a firm foundation for the system design phase. Enables planning of validation, verification and acceptance procedures. Enables project planning. Example, estimates of cost and time, resource scheduling. Usable during maintenance phase. Types of requirements. Functional requirement, non-functional requirement, performance requirement, interface requirement, design constraints and other requirements. First one is functional requirements. Transformations, requirements for sequencing and parallelism, data inputs and outputs, stored data, transient data, exception handling, nature of function, mandatory, desirable, optional, volatile or stable. Performance requirements. Capacity, response time, system priorities for user and functions, system efficiency, availability, fault recovery. All these requirements should be stated in measurable terms so that they can be verified. Verifiable. A requirement is verifiable if and only if there exists some finite cost-effective process with which a person or machine can check that the software meets the requirement. External interface requirements. User interfaces. Example, if display terminal used to specify record screen, formats, menus, report layouts, function keys. Hardware interfaces. Hardware interfaces, characteristics of the interface between the software product and hardware components of the system. Software interfaces specify the use of other software products, example OS, DBMS, other software packages. Design constraints. Software design constraints, standards for design, coding, naming, etc. Software interfaces use a specific application package, constraints on program size, data size, etc. Hardware design constraints, specific type of hardware, reliability requirements, hardware interfaces, requirements for spare capacity or spare performance. Design constraints, user interface design constraints, features of operator or user with details of working environment. Any special features required. Other requirements, security, safety, environmental, reusability, training. SRS standards. ANS or IEEE SRS standard, BS European Space Agency standards. SRS prototype outline. The purpose of SRS is delineate the purpose of the particular SRS, specify the intended audience for the SRS, identify the software products to be produced by name, explain what the software product will do and if necessary what it will not do. Describe the application of the software being specified, that is, benefits, objectives, goals as precisely as possible. Describe what the rest of the SRS contains, how the SRS organized. Product perspective. State whether the product is independent and totally self-contained. If the product is component of a larger system, then describe the functions of each component of the larger system and identify interfaces. Overview of the principal external interfaces of this product. Overview of hardware and peripheral equipment to be used. Give a block diagram showing the major components of the product, interconnections and external interfaces. Product functions. Provide a summary of functions the software will perform. The functions should be organized in such a way that they are understandable by the user. User characteristics. Describe the general characteristics of the eventual users of the product. General constraints, regulatory policies, hardware limitations, interfaces to other applications, parallel operation, audit functions, control functions, critical of the application, safety and security considerations. SRS prototype. Describe purpose of the function and the approaches and techniques employed, inputs and outputs, sources of inputs and destination of outputs, quantities, units of measure, ranges of valid inputs, timing. Functional requirements. Processing, validation of input data, exact sequence of operations, responses to abnormal situations, any methods to be used to transform inputs to outputs. External interface requirements, user interface, hardware interface, software interface, communication interface, other requirements. Appendices, not always necessary. It may include sample input-output formats, DFD, ERD documents, results of user surveys, cost analysis studies, supporting documents to help readers of SRS. Characteristics of a good SRS: unambiguous, complete, verifiable, consistent, modifiable, traceable, usable during the operation and maintenance phase. Examples of bad SRS documents: unstructured specification. Narrative essay, one of the worst types of specification documents. Difficult to change, difficult to be precise, difficult to be unambiguous, scope for contradictions, etc. Noise, presence of text containing information, irrelevant to the problem, silence. Aspects important to proper solution of the problem are omitted. Over specification, addressing how to aspect, for example, library member names should be stored in a stored descending order. Over specification restricts the solution space for the designer. Contradiction. Contradictions might arise if the same thing described at several places in different ways. Ambiguity. Literary expression, unquantifiable aspects. Example, good user interface. Forward references. References to aspect of problem defined only later on in the text. Wishful thinking. Descriptions of aspects for which realistic solutions will be hard to find. Complete. All significant requirements are included. Definition of responses of the software to all realizable classes of input data in all situations. Conformity to a standard. Full labeling and referencing of all figures, tables, etc. And definition of all terms and units of measure. Verifiable. A requirement is verifiable if and only if there exists some finite cost-effective process with which a person or machine can check that the software meets the requirement. Consistent. No two requirements are in conflict. Modifiable. Structure and style of SRS is such that changes to requirements can be made easily, completely and consistently. SRS organization. Table of contents, index, explicit cross-referencing, no redundancy. Traceable. An SRS is a traceable if the origin of each requirement is clear and it facilitates the referencing of each requirement in future. Backward traceability. Requirement explicitly referencing its source in previous documents. Forward traceability. Each requirement has a unique name or referencing number and it can be traced to design documents, program implementation. SRS review. Formal review done by users, developers, managers, operations, personnel to verify that SRS conforms to the actual user requirements, to detect defects early and correct them. Review typically done using checklist. Benefits of software requirement specification. Establish the basis for agreement between the customers and the suppliers on what the software product is to do. The complete description of the functions to be performed by the software specified in the SRS will assist the potential users to determine if the software specified meets their needs or how the software must be modified to meet their needs. Reduce the development effort. Provide a basis for estimating cost and schedules. The description of the product to be developed as given in the SRS is a realistic basis for estimating project cost and can be used to obtain approval for bids or price estimates. Provide a baseline for validation and verification. Organizations can develop their validation and verification plans much more productively from a good SRS. As a part of the development contract, the SRS provides a baseline against which complaints can be measured. Thank you.